Welcome, hominids, brothers and sisters.
The fuck
We
did you
are
call me?
here, Tanner. We're here today celebrating our primate status. We're here to talk about uh, the the kind of idea that we might be headed towards um, living forever. We're here to talk about the implications. We're here to talk about the problems, questions, and concerns about it. Today I'm joined by Bray, Trevor, and Tanner. Say hello, everybody. Bray, you first.
Hello, everyone. Do you really want to live forever? Forever? Forever?
Well,
Tanner,
I guess
Tanner,
I'll go
yeah.
next. I would say I don't want to live forever. That seems like a horrible trade-off on what I receive. Trevor?
Yeah. Good to see everyone again. I enjoy living. I don't really have a death reflex at the moment. If I could choose to live longer, if the moment came, I would say sure. Only insofar as I enjoyed living at that moment. Yeah, I think life is fun. I'm enjoying it so far. And I wouldn't mind living more of it. And maybe living more of it while being young would be kind of neat, you know. Maybe pull the clock back and be 22 for a long period of time or otherwise. I don't know. It just seems kind of fun to me.
I wouldn't want to be 22 again.
Old enough to drink, but young enough to be on your parents' insurance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Not anymore.
I turned 26 this past month in January, and yeah, I wouldn't
Steven,
want to
when
be
was your
22
birthday?
again. My birthday is January the 15th
Why didn't you say anything? What?
because I didn't feel like it. What we what we did for
there comes
what we did for the day of, we got together, got stoned out of our minds, and my birthday movie was Excalibur. That
Oh,
was
hell yeah.
yeah, like so it is becoming a kind of tradition because Brad and Sarah's birthday is in February, so they're getting to choose movies to watch for movie night. And it's gonna be good because Brad wants to watch Hellraiser or some bullshit like that, and it's gonna be so bad.
Oh, shit. All right. Yeah,
But
dude. Dude, I remember at the very beginning of that movie, there's that one lady with like a hole in her throat. That gave
yeah,
me
dude.
nightmares. Just that
No,
one lady.
my
And
my
that's
least
the
favorite
entire
is
movie.
the dude that's all teeth. You know what I'm talking about? He's I don't like him.
Ooh,
I straight
yeah.
up don't like him.
Yeah. Pinhead. Yeah.
Yeah. But back to the topic at hand. I wouldn't like to be 22. Um, I was doing some unspeakable things at 22, and I don't want to go back. I seriously don't want to go back. And what I'm trying to say is, like, at least for me, and this is spilling a couple of beans here. For me, life just seems to be getting better as I go. And I mean, good parts, silver linings about being raised in a very, kind of bad environment. Things are just getting better as I go along. I mean, it's just what it is. But
It's all uphill from here, baby.
yeah, it can't go downhill. Like, I've been downhill. It can't go back there. I'll die first. And that's the end of that. But look, lifespans are getting longer. And I wanted to ask everybody here, because I'm moderating tonight. I wanted to get everybody's weigh in on this. Data or otherwise. I'd like you to clarify though. Bray, Trevor, then Tanner. I'd like to know, if you had to pick one and only one thing, why lifespans are getting longer, what would they be?
If I had to choose one thing as to why lifespans were getting longer.
Yeah. If you just had to choose,
okay.
if you're informed or not informed, we just like to know. we can clip out.
So I
We-
don't know that much about like medically induced lengthening of lifespans, if that's the
Yeah.
way to say it. However, I have been consuming a lot of media lately on why some people around the globe in certain particular areas live longer than other people. For example, living to 100 or more. And so these people have a very different diet, lifestyle, different sort of cultural things, perhaps. But I think based on all of this stuff that I've consumed recently, I would say if I had to pick one thing, it would be lifestyle choices. And as funny as that is, that could be used to say, oh, well, being gay is a lifestyle choice, so maybe we should
Yeah.
stop being. But no, what I mean by that is like, what I mean is like being active and making health conscious decisions. There's a saying that pharmaceutical drugs and other, like, I guess you could say formal healthcare actually only account for like a small percentage of your overall well-being, and the sort of lifestyle choices that you make, like going to the gym or eating right, have a much larger contribution to your overall well-being.
Mhm.
Anyway, that's my spiel.
Okay, Trevor, if you had to
Cool.
pick just one reason why you think, uninformed or otherwise, why lifespans are getting longer, what would you say?
Oh, well, it depends on where we're starting from. Because like the easiest answer would be penicillin, but
Right.
No more VD for me, boys. No.
Oh, but yeah, this is kind of a really fun question because I ask myself this one a lot. I actually, for the audience that might not know, I actually work at in a neuroscience lab that studies Alzheimer's disease, dementia, and just generally the effects of aging on the brain. So I look at this from a brain perspective. What is the brain doing after a century, if it makes it that far? What has it succeeded in doing? How is it failing? That sort of thing. And I get a lot of people ask me, whether it be family or just random strangers on the street, when they grab hold of both of my shoulders, and they really want to know, how do you? I wanted to create like a cool way of thinking of that, but anyway,
What do you
want
know
to know
about the brain?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I. Anyway,
You
if
seemed
you and
informed
they
about
ask me,
it.
like, well, how do I live longer? Yeah. I tell them where I work, and they want to know, well, what can I do? How can I? What can I do to live longer? What can I do to not have Alzheimer's disease? And it's
Trevor
the
has
most.
been apprehended by the guy in the street that's like, "What do you do for a living?" And Trevor's like, "Oh, let me show you."
Yeah,
Sorry.
and I am glad. I am happy to show. I love my job. It's really fun. I really enjoy what I do, and I'll be more than happy to tell somebody about it. And in this case, the problem is though, as I answer the question, is it's a really annoying answer, and you're not going to like the answer at all. The answer is get plenty of sleep, exercise, and have a good diet. And that's literally the biggest inputs towards living a longer life, and also,
Yeah.
incidentally, having a healthier brain. Like that comes right back down to it. That's literally the if you want to live longer, those are the inputs. Now, if we're going to talk about the key to, and this is the way I like to. I don't mean to take over because Tanner hasn't spoken yet, but I like to think of, I like to think of like eternal youth. Let's say, like there is in front of us, scientifically speaking, a way to make a human being of whatever sort live for X years, and you just plug in X whatever you want, and they can live that long. They can be 35 for the next 1,000 years. That sort of thing. I visualize the ability to do that as something behind a sealed door. And the door has several seals on it, all around the door. And as we progress further throughout time, we slowly unlock and unseal each seal as we go along. And then until one day, I don't know when, I don't know how, we'll be able to step through that door and we walk on to the other side. And really the philosophical question that underlies all of this is, do we want that? Psychologically speaking, do we as a society want that? Is that what we're moving towards? It certainly seems like that's what we're moving towards. But we need to ask ourselves, well, is that the actual thing that we actually want?
Desire.
and that's where it gets
Do
really
we
weird.
even want that?
But anyway, exactly. The short answer to your question is many, many, many tiny things, but on a personal perspective or personal life, sleep, exercise, good diet, and that's really it.
Sure. Sure. So what about Tanner?
Steven cut out for me. I didn't hear what he said.
He cued you. It's your turn.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, as a bit of a diversion from you two, fun fact about human anatomy: we have very big heads and very narrow shoulders. So I'd say a major contributing factor to a lot of people living longer will probably be people, or I guess I should say the invention of the cesarean section, for one thing. No? People are actually coming out of childbirth still alive, and also kids are coming out of childbirth living. But I mean, as far as everything else that's already been stated, I mean, I more than agree with all of you. I mean, plenty of research and data over the last 120 years into human health backs up both of your statements.
The last coherent communication we had was from
Yes.
Tanner, and that's bad. So what I was trying to say is, in general, lifespans are getting longer because of access to food, clean water, sanitation, vaccines and antibiotics, and reproductive rights. Okay? So,
Right on.
if we
Let's
call all
not
that,
forget thick goth women, fellas.
God
what
damn
I
it,
was trying to
Tanner.
what I was trying to get into is the the four questions I have tonight. Is it worth it? The age problem, the antibiotic problem, uh, Red Queen versus what I would consider Trevor's science fiction. Is it moral to live longer? That's question number 2. Question number 3. To what extent are we willing to do this? What are we willing to give up to get this eternal life? And number 4, is it worth it to live forever? So, which one do we want to do?
These are all stellar questions. Stellar questions.
What's the
Very
first
well
one
thought out,
again?
Steve.
So, just a couple of bangers here. You know, like, is it worth it in terms of, is it worth pursuing? Is the first question. Number 2, is it moral to live longer? Is it moral to live forever? Third question, what are we willing to do? What are we willing to give up to just like get eternal life? And number 4, is it actually worth it to live forever? Like, in other words, once we're on the other side of living forever, is it worth it to do so? I mean, it's 2 plus tough.
Well, I kind of want to talk about the last one first. Now, when we talk about living forever, we're trying to bracket in and make sense of a particular like new paradigm, a potential or a possibility. It seems to me that the on switch as to living forever isn't quite you click it and you can never die. That's not what it seems to me. It doesn't seem like we're quite capable, period, of doing something like that. At the stage, like what I see is our ability to flip a switch, and next thing you know, we no longer have to worry about dying of old age. Like that seems to be the new paradigm with potential. So whether or not we could live forever, you sort of have to write into it the difference between those two things. It's not that we'll live for a million trillion until the universe collapses in on itself, or if it doesn't even do that, you know, or it's more so you no longer have to worry about dying at 80, and you can stick around for as long as you want to stick around for. That seems to me the more actual available potential future that we have before us. Like the latter seems much more possible to me.
Yeah, so I mean,
Right, so long as you're
it's
not hit by a car.
Mm-hmm.
yeah. I think it's important to say that all of these questions I've come up with for you guys are necessarily related, right? So what I'm trying to ask is, once on the other side, is it worth doing?
Well, is life worth living? To me, it's, you know.
I think it could be, based on some previous conversations we've had on the podcast already, actually.
It could be
I think
intriguing.
a lot of...
I think every human intellect could admit that it would be intriguing.
Oh, sure. Just talking about it is very intriguing. But I think about a lot of the questions through sort of an existentialist lens, because I think so much of what we do or could do is based entirely, whether people know it or not, on the idea that you are going to die in, let's see, I'm 26 now, so maybe like, if I'm lucky, 60 to 70 years from now. That's assuming that I die of some natural cause, and I'm not like hit by a bus or
pray
catch a
I never
stray
find
bullet.
you.
Right, or Tanner figures out my address.
I love the way we talk about this. By the way, why is being hit by a bus an unnatural death? What part of that is unnatural?
That's a good point. Yeah, I feel like there's definitely a quota that is met
There's a
every year. People,
But
it's like,
I
once
mean,
we put it on
seriously,
paper, I guess.
seriously.
Yep, there we go.
What?
Yeah.
And maybe we need to table this for later. But seriously, people, for anyone listening, we live in a high chaos state. Chaos is part of our life. Chaos is part of what we do every day. Why is being hit by a bus any less or more natural than just dying? Than dying
It is
of old
funny
age?
to say
Well-
that, because in so much conversation when we talk about the word natural, it's like,
I mean,
as
here's
opposed to supernatural, like
yeah.
how
Oh,
many
I mean,
people
yeah.
are getting
Like the Lord took him.
smoked
Yeah.
by
Yeah,
the Lord
there's-
every
there-
year.
there's no
Yeah.
good time to die. And there's no good time to be, be smote by God. I mean, So
Well,
what
Well,
I'm,
it's some people's time, Stephen. Sometimes it's just their time
thoughts
to
and
go.
prayers. But
Yeah, but
yeah,
hear me out. If I don't believe in him, can he still smite me?
yeah, really.
It depends on who you
But-
ask. But
Look, people, look.
Mm.
What I'm trying to say is that would an antelope, being a prey animal, consider dying of old age a less natural or more natural death than dying of being a prey animal, like being prey to another predatory animal? I mean,
I
just
thought you were gonna say being hit by a bus.
I'm gonna throw
no.
that back.
I mean, well, let's just take it another step in that direction. Would a deer, having died of old age, consider that dying of old age is any more or less natural than being hit by a bus? I mean,
Well, right.
no. I think it's just human vanity that leads us to believe that dying by hit by a bus is unnatural.
Well, here's the
I
thing,
mean, I'm
though.
serious about that. Dead serious.
We got to put it on its head a little bit, because the more we get into as the centuries roll by, the less a natural death is. That is to say, it's kind of a God of the gaps thing in this way. As time goes on, it's no longer, oh, he died of old age. We say he died of a heart attack, and then we take that out of the
Yeah.
box of dying of old
Yeah.
age. And then he died of cystic fibrosis, and we take that out of the box. And we're curing these things, and then eventually the entire abstraction, the entire binary at unnatural and natural death becomes completely irrelevant, because death is just the cessation of life at this point. And like, it's
That's right.
something you almost have to, as time goes on, it's either something that hasn't been solved as like an algorithm that has like a certain amount of residual error, and like eventually you figure out how to deal with every possible contingency. There just isn't any more error anymore. And then at that point you have no natural death, no unnatural death. It's just the entire thing is just a different sort of abstraction. What I'm talking
Yeah.
about here is, it's really interesting, because the whole idea, the whole paradigm of natural versus unnatural death becomes kind of strange. I mean, imagine what it's like in the 24th century, let's say. Really different. We don't.
Well,
yeah.
Look, I'll testify for, and be witness for the prosecution for whoever's getting sued over the bus driving accident here.
Exactly.
You know, and say that we can discuss to a degree that a bus is a human construct, that there is going to be at fault. For sake of clarity or brevity, we'll say that it was the bus driver's fault that this person got hit. We can assign blame in there.
it.
And
What
say
if he
that
meant to do it? What if the bus driver meant to do it? How is
there's
that
human
an
error?
unnatural idea?
But I guess at the same time, you could say, well, what were the factors that led to, such and such diabetes or other
Yeah,
diseases? Is there a human element in there?
true. Now, let's say it this way. Which is preferable? To be hit by a bus and die, or to father and grandfather many children and die in a bed? I know which one I prefer, you know?
That's kind of that's a
Uh,
little bit of an open box there. Where
yeah.
Can I die in a bed on a bus that's running into someone?
it's doing a kickflip in the air too. Yeah.
Listen, guys, the
you guys
bus
get what
is
I'm saying.
barreling down the road, and you have an option.
No.
You have a choice to make.
God.
hijacking the fucking podcast, I'm telling you. But look, people, for those of us listening, what I really mean to ask is, like, what are your assumptions about life? Do you think it's this quality that we have and that we alone possess? Of course not. You can look out your window and see different versions of life that you should respect. They share the genome with you. They want to live, just like you. They want to live. So I mean, we talk about this often, but what I'm saying here is, like, what truly are your assumptions about life? And what assumptions are lost whenever we return to Bray's point that I was hoping one of us would bring up before me? There's like, you make all the meaning in your life, but a lot of that meaning kind of goes away whenever you don't die. I mean, that's the core of question 4. Is it worth it to live forever? Well, I mean, there's no urgency. There's no expediency. There's no rush. You can couch surf forever. I mean, you don't have to do anything productive. In a world that has solved death, hunger is no longer a problem. I mean, it's so much harder to attain meaning if there is no logical conclusion to life. And that's strange.
It is. Here's what's difficult about it, though, because at times it's no longer a choice too, because it seems like we're going that way. Like we're figuring out what cystic fibrosis is, and we're solving the heart problem. And with human beings, we're incredibly complicated. Incredibly complicated, like you mentioned earlier in a previous episode. Like this cat is incredibly complex, incredibly interesting.
It's orders of magnitude more complex than anything in this house, including
certainly.
the computers.
Factually correct. It's a correct statement. And what's interesting is you, at the same time, like anything else, you're capable of being solved in a way. I mean, you are a physical mass. What exactly about you is incomprehensible.
We are made of food.
You're made of star stuff, like everything else. And just like that, I can take this star stuff, see the way that it's barreling down, in whatever direction it's going in. I can understand it as a system, as a series of interacting neurons that form this overall connective network, and I can come to interact with it and encounter it in such a way that I can solve problems within it, whether that be solving heart issues, talking about the issues of like the lower body, or solving problems related to dementia or Alzheimer's disease. Like, these things are physical, tangible problems, and just like any other physical, tangible problem, they can be solved. And if you look at society today, one of two things will happen: either we'll destroy ourselves, or we'll start living ceaselessly longer than you and I would possibly anticipate. It'll go from 100 years to about 150 years to Who knows? It seems as if we're
It-
we're really at the precipice of something really scary and strange. Because you mentioned this thing, Stephen, like the possibility of having meaningless lives, and it's still all the same. We're barreling towards it.
Yeah, so I mean, Trevor, I'd like to pose a question here.
Hmm.
Inasmuch as you have almost no control over being hit by a bus, okay? Do you have any control over our inexorable trend towards longer life? No,
Hmm.
I don't
That's
think so.
exactly my point. That's exactly my point. Unless you have
In other
the
words, I
yes.
think it's rooted in our DNA all the way down
Hmm.
to the genome to go as long as per se possible. Um,
Hmm.
and there's nothing we can do about that. In other words, we have been dealt a hand,
Hmm.
and we have to play it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, it absolutely does, and I completely agree. I completely agree, and that's sort of the crux of the issue, really. It certainly is. The way that we're barreling towards something, it's not an issue of want or desire, it's an issue of direction. And that's the direction we're barreling towards. It's what we're becoming every second of every day. We're getting closer towards it.
Okay.
We're curing all these things.
So question number two comes into focus. Is it moral to live longer? I'd like to pick up um, Hitchens at this point, of course, because we have to have. I mean, our quota has not been met yet. Uh, so like he had this very intriguing story about how like how insane would it be if, let's say, I was y'all's father, Bray, Trevor, Tanner, I was your biological father, okay, not just your father in heaven. And what I mean by that is like in 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 this discussion, I'm your dad forever. Okay, I mean, I
Right.
mean, who 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 wants that? Who wants their father to inform them, I'm going to be with you forever. I'm not
Mm.
going anywhere. I mean, that would be heinous. I mean, it would be bad. You know, it's not quite to the level of like Hitchens' story about, because he was of course talking about God and how he's there forever and he knows what you're thinking and this, that, and the other. But still, the axiom holds. It's like, oh yeah, I'm your dad and I'm here forever and I'm not going
Mm.
anywhere and I'm always going to be able to bother you. Like, um, I'm not saying that we want our fathers to die, but once again, it feels like there has to be a logical conclusion to
Hmm.
that behavior. And the most definite conclusion behind fatherly behavior is death. You don't get to
Hmm.
do that anymore once you've died.
Well, I mean, for all of human existence, the final conclusion has been death.
But I mean, Tanner, I kind of disagree with the statement I just made. Like we on second thought, on moment's thought, we we have books. We talk to the dead all the time. They have not had their final word. They'll be read by our children.
One thing that I can talk about as far as is it moral. Right now, it's hard for me to go to something specifically inherently immoral about. Let's put it this way: simply being incapable of dying, so to speak, um, living indefinitely in itself does not seem immoral to me in any sense at this time. That's nothing to say about the societal implications of living forever. That could be the biggest catalyst. I mean, it would undoubtedly be the biggest catalyst for social issues in the history of the planet. Uh,
Yeah, imagine if the boomers were here with us for good.
Forever.
I mean, like,
Oh
what
God.
what if what if they in
Ronald Reagan has
all
been resuscitated.
yeah, I mean, like, what if like all of their quirks that they had were just here to stay? I mean,
Right.
I
Yeah.
know lots of boomers, and Trevor, we need you to weigh in on this as well. I've met only a handful of boomers that were like actually worth having around. Okay, and only a few. And look, I'm not laughing right now. If that's sad, like
All
most
right.
of them are homophobic,
Mm-hmm.
most of them are racist.
Mm-hmm.
Where we live, where I live, in fact,
Right.
down here in the Bible Belt. Um, and it seems like I have to be a good stoic about this and realize there's nothing I can do about this. No amount of education will fix their problems. So, Trevor, my question for you is,
Hmm.
let's say that we could live a life with no upper bound, like an unknowable upper bound of like years we could live. Would the brain eventually stop being able to process new data, process new information? And what I mean by
Ooh.
that is like these
Hmm.
boomers out here will not be taught. They refuse to believe that
Mhm.
homosexuals deserve rights. I mean, like, so I mean, what if we had the first human generation that was, for lack of better terms, immortal, and they carried with them all of their problems forever?
Mhm.
Is the
Yeah.
brain
So,
capable of continuing?
well, the short answer is no. It's at its present stage, at the present stage of human evolution or human control, the
Sure.
brain wouldn't be capable of doing something like that. I mean, for example, the basic way the brain works right now, and I don't want to talk about out of my ass, so I'll say as little, as most as I can, which may be very little. I'm not nearly as good at this as I would like to be. But essentially, your brain, things get too complex. There's just too much to reach for. There's just too much to all of these things. Your brain just there's just too much information in that sort of way, and it just becomes too much. And that's essentially the crux of the issue that you're striking on right here when it comes to getting older. Now, one of the really interesting things is as you do get older, as your brain starts to fail to do things. It's just a natural consequence of aging. And by that, I don't mean you start to get Alzheimer's disease or dementia. That's not what I mean. I mean, quite literally, as a human being, your brain will get less capable at rendering and remembering information compared to everyone else. Like everyone is like that. You know, everyone droops at some point in time. There are some people that we refer to as super agers or cognitive maintainers. It depends on what lab you're working in, but essentially, there are people out there that retain a positive or like not negative cognitive slope over time. But even they collect, let's say, like tau proteins. Basically, we call them neurofibrillary tangles or NFTs, which is hilarious. Uh,
That is fucking hilarious.
I am
That
serious.
that that
Nobody
is
else
beyond
laughs.
hilarious.
Yeah, I'm the only one. I heard it for the first time and I laughed. And like everybody else in the room were like, like millennials and they didn't get it at all.
Yeah,
And
that has to be tied in with
mhm,
art imitates life imitates art. I
that's
mean, like,
100%. That's
I mean,
100%.
it's got to be. It's got to be
So anyway, your brain fills with these NFTs, right? And like eventually they
just
collect and
cluttered full of little monkey pictures.
a fucking JPEG of a monkey
Yeah,
doing a
fucking
backflip.
JPEG, a JPEG of a holographic 3D pill or whatever.
Yeah, you
God, I
spent
hate it.
$50,000, your entire house. But yeah, so those things collect in certain regions of your brain, specifically in your medial temporal lobe, in an area that it fits a bit like I don't want to get way too far into the weeds here, but this area that fits around like a sleeve around your hippocampus, called the entorhinal cortex. It's one of the key things that it does, I think, is or research I've read says is it draws in information from across the brain to be then collected and concatenated for new information with the hippocampus, learning and memory. That's the whole purpose of the hippocampus, as far as I'm aware. It's one of the only areas of the brain that still do neurogenesis, the production of new neurons. And that's another thing. And this is where I'll cut it. Your brain produces pretty much all the neurons it's going to use in utero before, like, as you're getting to production and like getting to that point where you're actually spend the rest of your life with this set amount of neurons. So that's one of those fundamental issues when we come to this question of living for forever. You have a finite amount of neurons in your brain, and due to just life, you're going to lose some. There is going to be atrophy. There is going to be apoptosis. Neurons will in fact die just due to existence, just like cancer. Over time, you will eventually, if you live long enough, a
Get
cell will
cancer.
replicate in a stupid way and you will get cancer. And these are exactly the problems I talk about, is the seals around the door between you and eternal youth. These are what I just listed just now. Cancer and finite neural capacity are two of the biggest seals on the door to eternal youth. So if you're asking the question, well, how do you live forever? Well, those are two things you have to solve. Or maybe circumvent both and become a machine. I don't know.
Yeah. So, but I just wanted some textual evidence. Not a lot, but just some textual evidence to like show the magnitude of the task in front of us to live
Mm,
forever. It's not
Mhm.
happening soon. You know what I
mhm.
mean? Um,
Can you imagine like having to go to like the doctor or like even probably at your home at some point and you're like your little like biologic device is pinging you and it's like
yeah, you're almost full.
warning, your your brain is almost at full capacity. Upgrade to the, 10 petabyte plan, for however much money a month.
Or else you forget your daughter's face. Yeah.
Yeah, you're like backing up you're like, "Oh, here's everything I know about architectural design. I've got it backed up on a floppy, over in wherever.
They
Got
probably
to
get you
offload
synced to the
that,
stream.
upload cooking 101 so that I can make
Yeah,
dinner tonight."
I mean, if you're able to take them out like modular, who are you even at that point? What is who?
exactly,
Where do you draw the line
exactly.
between what is Brayton and what isn't Brayton at that point, or what is Bray and what isn't Bray, or what is Stephen and is not Stephen? I mean, the line drawn there becomes extremely fuzzy and not one that's easily treaded upon without something really dangerous happening.
For sure. I would like to comment at least one more thing about question one. Like, is it worth pursuing? In other words, like, um, we've talked about some of the hurdles. We've talked about some of the big problems. So, is it worth pursuing? I mean, we've talked about, is it moral? We've kind of slid that one under the rug, and that's okay. But is it worth pursuing? Um, One thing I will say about this, I believe it's totally worth pursuing because I really think that this might be a case of like evolutionary arms race type thing where it's I'm not saying it's
Mm.
definitely this. I'm saying that I feel like it's going to become this. Um because of the nature of the problems we're dealing with. They might not be seals on a door, as Trevor has suggested. It could be very much the case that if we were to, say, stop research into how to live longer, we would start to live less. In other words, the Red Queen problem. You're having to run as fast as you can to stay where you are. In other words, maybe we'll get to some tapered off level, like 150 years, let's say, and then the speed at which bacteria are becoming more and more oppressive is exactly matched by the speed that we can counteract them. What do we say?
Well, not much I can say.
What if it's not
Specifically,
a seal?
just in what way? In what way?
Just in the way that I've described, like what if it's not a key and lock situation?
Mm-hmm.
What if it simply doesn't work that way? In other words, what if it's uh, a kind of brick wall that we have to mine through or tunnel through, and there's some dude on the other side of this wall putting more wall. You know,
Mm.
like in other words, right now lifespans are increasing, but what if in the near future they taper off and plateau
Mm-hmm.
and stay that way?
I see your
Maybe
point now. Okay.
maybe here and there we'll plateau again, but overall we'll be doing the running fast as you can to stay right where you are maneuver.
I see
In
your
other
point.
words,
So
yeah, go ahead.
yes. So if you visualize it in terms like I was saying earlier, like some sort of model with like a certain amount of residual air in it, and the residual air is the stuff that causes death, and like you can control for things, so you can like fix heart problems, and that can like you
Mhm.
can control for that in your model, and eventually you get your residual air, the amount of stuff that you can't explain, when it comes to a lifespan and trying to elongate it. It gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, but it's never zero. And that sounds to me like what we're talking about right now. Like basically what we're saying is there is a door right in front of us, and as you unlock seals, you realize that there are more seals. Not that more are added, but just the fact that more seals were always there and you just weren't presently aware of them. Or even
Yeah.
worse, let's say you start doing changes to the human body or the human genome or just whatever, and that
And you
just
develop
creates
new
more seals.
problems.
You
Yeah.
develop new problems, and like it's something that's never actually positively solved. Well, as one answer to that question, you could always. My first thought was like weird, like Detroit become human, turn into a cyborg type bullshit. But even
Yeah.
then, like you just have robot problems, you know, because like now you just have a different level of issues.
Have to
So
earl up
robot mo
the elbow,
problems.
you know?
Yeah, yeah,
Well,
yeah.
You
Like
know, it's funny enough. All this reminds me of this. It's like we're
Recess the
all dying,
timer.
right? Yeah, something like that. But
well,
Well, Trevor, yeah, go ahead, Tanner.
oh, you can finish what you were saying, Ethan.
Well, I was just gonna say, Trevor, I find your model like extremely distasteful, and I love you for it. But so like,
please.
so, you know, uh, I don't think it would be a big stretch to say that it's human vanity to suggest that there are a set number of seals on the door. And what I mean by that is that there are a set number of seals on the door right now, but later on there will be less or more or happen to be the same number. What I'm really trying to say is that we have to internalize that we are not moving across a static background. We're just not. The plants outside my window are desperately trying to kill each other. I mean, they are trying to strangle each other to win at this genetic lottery. They're trying to increase their chances. I mean, and that's not going to change. We are not mobile people across a static background. We are little points atop a vast moving background. We are part of the background if you zoom out far enough. That's what I'm trying to say. So it cannot be, I would bet all the money I have, it cannot be the case that there are a set number of like these seals on the door. It has to be the case that there are quite literally developmental issues that we will never catch up to. I truly believe that we will never catch up to them. You know, we can also bring in the great filter idea in cosmology. Like there's some great filter, that separates us between, being able to uh, propagate out into the galaxy and so on. Maybe the great filter are these seals that we're talking about. Who knows? But my point is that we have to address our assumptions. We are not mobile things moving across a static background. Everything's moving around us. Everything.
should we talk about some of these moral issues?
Yeah.
Well, I got a bunch written down just off
Lead
the
the way,
top of the
Brayden.
head that I definitely see being an issue. Food obviously is one of them. We obviously still have issues now with feeding everybody on the planet, and then now suddenly people can't, not
They
that
still have
you
the same
would
right
think
to
that
life that you have.
you would think that by the time we were able to say with some degree of confidence, well, we've solved death, that we wouldn't still have starving people, but we all know that won't be the case.
Yeah, there will always be starving people, but
the
like,
depravity between the best people on the planet as far as how well off they are and the worst people is astronomical in comparison.
Well, yeah. Well, that really comes down to one thing. Do you think we'll ever have a planet without conflict? Because I think it seems to me that most of the starvation on our planet at this point in time in the 21st century is created due to
Comes from
conflict of
war.
various
Yeah.
sorts. It comes from war. It comes from what's happening in Israel-Palestine conflict.
Mhm.
It happens in Ukraine. It happens in Sudan right now. It happens in Myanmar right now. It happens in places where there's this drawn-out sort of conflict that's brewing, some sort of power struggle of some sort or another. And that seems to me to be where most of I'm not sure where the full spectrum of things are. I'm afraid I'm not too educated when it comes to the sociology of this issue. But if we talk about just the general span of starvation, it seems mostly to be caused by conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Trevor, I mean, like, um, there there are big advances in food production, right?
Mm.
Um, like it's just like Richard Dawkins says, if you think that science is uninteresting, fuck off. Like I genuinely don't have time for you. We're talking about the human enterprise here, and you couldn't be bothered.
Right.
On a much less hostile note, my students ask me things like, when am I going to use this? Whenever you eat. Whenever you eat, that's when you're going to use it. Like whenever we're doing these chemical drawings or something like that. When am I going to use this? Tonight when you eat, you're going to use them. What I mean by that is the Haber process is one that feeds us all. Like literally everyone on this planet eats because of the Haber process. Where they manipulate the equilibria conditions and make the nitrates, and the ammonias come out of. Obviously, the nitrates are probably on down the line, but the ammonia producing processes that give us food, that we can eventually get down to the ground and so on. Um, why did I bring this up? Because what if it's the case that our food production can grow with our increase in population as it's doing right now? I really believe kind of what Trevor's talking about. Um, if there was no conflict, there there might be enough food to go around. Like seriously, all we have to do is get it to the people who need it, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
But
Well,
I'll bring up another more keen example for you, Bray. What about the clear and present problems that we're facing right now? I can't afford anything. I'm a teacher. I'm a well-educated
oh
teacher,
yeah.
and on a single income by myself, I cannot afford to rent a single bedroom apartment and drive a used vehicle. This is ridiculous. I mean, this is truly stupid. That's why I've moved into this new place. I can't afford it on my own. We're talking about the bare minimum of supplies in this country. Obviously, I'm not so spoiled and so stupid as to believe that those are the bare minimum conditions. But you guys get what I'm saying. We have all of this first world, development, and we're still not able to provide affordable housing. I mean, what's the deal?
Right. Yeah, that's definitely one of the things that I have is probably a mix between voting population and property.
Mm.
I actually saw a really good. I'm going to keep calling it Twitter and tweets because that's what I know it as. But on Twitter, there was somebody who proposed exactly what we're talking about here, a little bit more of in the shade of a anti-capitalist dig about, say,
Very
everybody
good.
started living much longer for like 200 years. Well, that means that all the rich people that own everything are going to live for 200 years, and they're going to be able to accumulate more and more things before they are forced to inevitably die, and all of that be dispersed by whatever means and taxed, for example. There are people that think that inheritance tax should be rid of, which would eliminate the possibility of that going somewhere else. But sort of things of that nature. And so the kind of conclusion was that the gap between the richest people
Well,
on the planet and the poorest people would be even more rapidly,
let me
accrued.
let me
Plus,
ask you
yeah, go
let
ahead,
me
Tanner.
ask you something, Brayton. What drives people 99% of the time to accumulate wealth like that, if not at least on the prospect of providing for some future progeny? I guess encouragement of no longer existing. I feel like there would be quite a bit more apathy in a capitalist system.
Oh, well, yeah, perhaps. I mean, there's one thing to say. Are you trying? Are you saying that like if it were the case that rich people suddenly, realized, oh well, I can live
Yeah,
generally as
but
long as I want
at
to.
that point, you have to reach a conclusion of, well, if I'm going to live forever, why am I doing this?
So is that to say that people eventually get wise? And to get wise is to realize that this money was...
No, I'm saying that with eternal youth, or I should say just eternal life, let's just leave it like that.
Mhm.
Eventually, you will become apathetic.
You would.
Okay.
You
It's
will
I think
become
they're already.
apathetic to life.
I think a lot of them already are apathetic. At least as far as other people's lives are
Exactly.
concerned.
But they would at least still have the driving factor of leaving something behind for future generations. But they'll never have that definite cutoff of, I'm doing everything for them up until this point. Then all my hard work goes to them. There is no cutoff there. There's nothing. That's when the system really breaks down, I think, because it's a driving evolutionary factor that we want to, in all cases, always provide and secure the welfare of our progeny. It's hard-coded into us. That's why we do pretty much everything.
Some more than others, Tanner.
This is complicated. So
Extremely.
So I actually have a story I could tell about this. I have a story I could share. So,
Does anybody get hit by a bus?
No.
Aw.
You wish. So I
I think you should work that into the story somehow, and then when we least expect it, drop it on us.
Well, I can't now because you brought that up. I'll try. So I used to go to a coffee shop named Railway at Ruston. I'm sure many of us are really quite familiar with it. Well, many of us being those in this between the four of us. So when I was at Railway, there was this woman who was one of the coffee baristas. She made coffee. She was very nice, and she was without a doubt, one of the most beautiful people I have ever encountered in my entire life. And I was like 21, I think, and I could not believe it took me back. She looked like she was part of like a picture from like a sci-fi novel, and like somebody drew it to be and you look at the picture and you're like, okay, that person doesn't actually exist. This is way too weird. Anyway, that was her. And I walk up to her, and I swear this is connected. I walk up to her, and we start a friendship, and then eventually she suggests like this book. I tell her at one point I really like sci-fi, and she tells me like, hey, you should read this book. I loved it when in high school. You should read it. She gives me this book called Scythe. I don't know if any of y'all are familiar with it. It's a Scythe is a sci-fi teen romance novel, I guess. Anyway, I hated it. It was a terrible book.
Very good. Very good.
It was a terrible book. I hated it. I read it cover to cover, and I hated every second of it. Cover to cover. But one of the things that happens in this book is...
The things we do for love, fellas.
The things you do for desperation. Correction. Desperation. Different.
I just
Well, I know at least one other expert on that in this group.
I just sent into the chat that Trevor's neurons were straight up activated when he saw fucker at Railway.
That's
oh my
right.
God.
My
That's
neurons
right.
were engorged.
It was like that. I don't know. It was like that one like comedy bit, like Dumb and Dumber, when he sees that lady at the beginning of the movie, and like just his entire brain goes off of like all the potential life he could live with this woman that he met all of 10 seconds ago. Anyway, I did that with this woman from Railway. I read this book, and the book was essentially about what if you could live forever. It was literally the plot of this entire discussion. The whole plot was people start living forever. They start having kids. Their kids have kids. Their kids have kids have kids. Some people have 8 kids, who each of which have 8 kids, and after that, those 8 kids each have 8 kids. Like some people just like to live that way, and all the while you are perfectly alive, and you have grandchildren, and your grandchildren have great grandchildren, and you're still there, and you're doing stuff, and it's interesting because you just keep on accumulating wealth, is what they're doing. And again, I hated the book, but to me, it's like that's one thing that you could work into the way you look at this. If you start growing older, I don't think you lose the want to provide for your family. I think that'll continue. I don't think you'll necessarily get apathetic as much as you'll just continue accumulating. And the next thing you know, the really big, nice house, instead of being this big, gets that big, and it goes off to your progeny in that sort of way. And you get to meet not only your grandkids, but your great grandkids.
If everyone is living ad infinitum and we're all accumulating constantly, if everyone's accumulating over the entire course of infinity, material wealth doesn't matter anymore. None of it matters anymore.
Well, did it ever matter?
No.
Right, right.
But that's what I'm saying.
I mean, really, it like if we're coming away with a central message here, after me talking, after Tanner's talk, after Trevor's talk, after Bray's talk, it's like we come closer and closer to the conclusion that this talk is a lot less about living forever and more about what's actually important.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's not
what.
It's forgive me for using this time-honored saying, but it's what is it? Not about how deep you fish, it's about how you wiggle your worm. It's not about the span of your lifetime that makes it worthwhile. It's what you choose to do with the finite amount of time you have been given.
Right.
And to, I think, desire anything else.
All we
Well,
have to
I
do
shouldn't
is
say that.
decide what
To
to do
try
with the
to
time that is
accept
given us.
anything less than the boundaries set by our own human nature is, I think, paying a disservice to the human condition, isn't it? To ignore that most fundamental aspect that we will live and then we will die.
Well,
And that's what it's supposed to be,
It's
Well-
stripped. I'm not like appealing to like tradition or anything here. I'm actually going somewhere with this. It removes all substance, in my opinion, from an existence. So if you are going to go on forever and you are going to always accumulate, then everything becomes meaningless and valueless. So because you will never be without it unless you choose to end your own life. So it's you can only be a hedonist for so long before eventually that dopamine response in the brain gives out.
Speak for yourself.
Well, I think this is kind of a good thing in a way. I think I think the elongation of life in this way is the potential for mankind, all of humanity, to sort of conduit into.
But in
the
absence
potential.
in the absence of all suffering at that point, if we eliminate all disease, old age, struggles for food and everything, the only thing we will have left is pleasure.
Oh, I disagree. I don't think we'll ever be without suffering. I mean, we talk about it right now.
I mean, there will always be like emotional distress and heartache.
Look.
And that is suffering. You have to understand it like this. This I think is really important. This is something I've thought about for a long time. There are time periods in history where you would have, as an example, city-states that would vie against each other and kill not only one another but one another's children, and they would do it for centuries on end until eventually one city-state would destroy the other. That's a very different state of existence, and what exactly suffering means is different for that period in time than for ourselves. And that is to say that I suffer. Steven suffers. Brayton suffers. Tanner, you suffer. You're insufferable, Tanner. Anyway,
Because he
So
won't pick up that goddamn dongle. I'm telling you, people, I
yeah,
hate
yeah,
him.
that's
I'm working on it. I don't have a car.
get
I would,
yourself a
dude,
car.
with that
Go
government
invest.
money.
You know, I wonder if, and Trevor, if you were going somewhere, I'm not trying to cut you off.
Oh, go ahead.
I wonder, thinking about this, if it's not the situation that if, say, you were born into a time where you were informed that, hey, good news, you're going to live as long as you want to live until you want to die. Would that, in your opinion, be more terrifying than somebody telling you, hey, you've been born into a time where, you got maybe 85 years if you're lucky, and then you're out of here for good? Because I think it puts the pressure on you as somebody who will live indefinitely to decide when you are going to leave. And if you don't decide to leave, then you are here forever, constantly taking in new information, constantly having to exist. This is one of the things that I thought about whenever I watched the Netflix special, A Trip to Infinity. It's a bunch of physicists that got together in this documentary, and they talk about the concept of infinity and what does that really mean and what are the real implications. And, I'm not trying to give any sort of appeal to whatever, but one of the things that was said in there, or rather what I'm trying to say is I'm not trying to hype up any one thing that was said in a documentary on Netflix about theoretical physics. But one of the things that they talked about was, well, technically or theoretically, everything that could possibly happen will happen eventually if we take infinity to mean sort of the way that it is, quite literally, meaning that, for us to die in this life, it seems like, okay, well, we're gone forever. And then eventually the entropy may reverse and everything may reset and do itself over again, albeit perhaps in some slightly, incredibly marginally different way, or maybe some huge margin of a different way. And it may do it a
Unlikely.
million trillion times, and maybe life never forms again, or until it does, or like I said, it doesn't, or something. And then all of a sudden, it's this sort of idea that even if I die, the smallest possible chance that it won't be me, but some life will happen again, infinitely, forever, is terrifying. But so is the idea of just not existing at all forever. And so that's why I ask, what is more terrifying, being born and told that you cannot die unless you will it, or being told that you have limited time until your time is up? I don't know, man.
It's all scary. It's all scary.
It's
I do want to mention one thing that Stephen brought up. I thought it was really interesting. It was about boomers and the fact that they would never go
We should
away.
start wrapping up, by the way. But go ahead.
Oof. Okay, so I wanted to mention this. So psychologically speaking, we're very different from the people of the first century, let's say, or 2,000 years before that, or in the 15th century, just in different pieces of time. Socioculturally, we've evolved and become very different as time has gone on. And that's possible due to the fact that the people in the 15th century are dead. They're not here. They're not here to bother us anymore. Their psychological structure in which they encountered reality, that being through like the redemption of Christ in Europe, or complete and total submission if you're in Mecca, or so on and so forth, wherever you are in the world, your way of encountering reality shifted and changed and fuzzied through as time went on, as new people took the torch and changed it ever so slightly, and you were dead, gone. So what is this be said if the boomers never went away? Psychologically speaking, they would leave a certain structure on the nature of human existence that would never go away. It would never be satiated. It would just be the way that reality fundamentally is from this point forward. There will always be a touch or a color of boomer in there. Now, it's true to say that is already true, and it is true of what happened in the first century, but not in the same way, like quite literally
They're
they're
not
still here.
literally present, you know?
Right.
They're quite literally still present, and they're not going anywhere. And just like that, there's something to be said about being a homophobe because they're still here and they're not going anywhere. Like there's that. Not to say that there is something valuable to it, just more so you'll never be able to remove that thing that composes the current psychological drama that is mankind in the 21st century. It becomes the same as it will be in the 24th century, or at the very least it's colored to such an extent. Very interesting and a very scary thought to take into consideration.
Brayden, any closing remarks?
As far as under my nobody dies question mark, we talked about food. We've sort of touched on the idea of voting and property, the idea of people were still around. What does that mean? We even talked about family life. Like Trevor said, if 8 people have 8 children and those 8 children, so on, that's a lot of family to deal with, which goes directly into another thing of social relations. We already have very highly inflated social problems. Like, a while back I went through my Facebook, surprised I haven't deleted it by now, but I was just removing anybody that I didn't speak to or
Good
didn't
choice.
even know. Some people I didn't even know who they were. Like I couldn't have told you who they were. And suddenly, that number gets a lot smaller because we just simply cannot maintain relationships with that many people. I had somebody, like, I know people as acquaintances, or there are people that I haven't spoke to in years that I could chat up and be like really good friends with, but it would be impossible for me to maintain a working relationship with so many people constantly. I had somebody tell me one time that, if you didn't check up on your friends frequently, we'll put it that way, that they weren't really your friends. And I was like, well, that's just bullshit. I mean, I have plenty of friends who I haven't spoken to in forever, and I could call them up at any time. I just can't possibly maintain, a one-on-one conversation with hundreds of people every day or every week or every month. Like, that's just so much pressure on top of everything else. And we also talked about the information problem, like, the taken out of, the different boot drives for I need
Afraid
to
so.
cook a filet mignon, or I need to, I don't know, drive
you gotta. It's
NASCAR
gotta
or
be.
something.
It's gotta be the. I know kung
Fine
fu.
dining and
You know what I mean?
breathing.
Where's that JPEG of a dog doing a kickflip?
Where's my monkey NFTs? Get those.
You go into Tanner's brain case, and it's just like terabytes and terabytes and terabytes of questionable pictures. Like, you know what I mean? Like, just
Let's check his
highly
mind drive, fellas.
questionable pictures.
Hold him down. What's he got in there anyway?
You all fully knew.
Anyways, all this to say that my personal outtake on eternal youth or living for a very long time, to me, I would love to, because I love literature, I love art, I love music, film. I could do these things perpetually. It feels like I would rather do them perpetually until it felt like I needed to off myself because of how much I had consumed or whatever, but I would happily consume to the point of needing to die before, being prematurely offed by whatever natural cause or unnatural. Before I got hit by a bus, I would much rather
my
be
God.
able to
I'd rather be
consume
hit by a bus.
as much of these precious human artifacts that we leave behind in our wake every day. Just because, like I said in the last podcast, I think all I can hope for is to utilize myself to my maximum potential. I want to dip my fingers in every possible aspect of living while I still can. I am a jack of all trades, master of none, and I am proud of it. I don't need to be an Einstein or a president or anything like that to be happy. I just want to experience life and all that it has to offer. And
Because
if I
it's
had
important.
200, right, if I had 200 more years to do that, I would be ecstatic. but I don't. So I try to cherish every day, sip existentialist coffee here.
Such a good speech. That was a great way to end. And
Very
I
good,
completely
very good.
concur. I have
What
no
about
exit
Tanner?
speech because Ray just got it right then.
Tanner's like, I got to go clear my hard drive.
Actually, I do have something to say in closing.
Yes.
I hope I'm not hiding it, but I'm very materialist to those of you out there. I do not believe in an afterlife. I believe that once we are gone, that is it. That is it. That's oblivion. We reach it, and that is the same as what we were before we were born. There is no fear of death after you die. There's nothing. You take none of what you got in this life with you. Which leads me to say that whether you live 50 years, 100 years, or 500 years, you take none of that with you. And this leads me to believe that what's more important rather than living an exceptionally long life and having all the time to do all the things you want to do is living a fulfilled life in the time we are allotted. It's not about, duration. It's quite literally just about the fulfillment you achieve with what you are given. That is why I personally do not want to have an exceptionally long lifespan. I think that removes a lot of the excitement and the joy out of life, is not knowing when it could actually end. And it forces you to live every day, potentially knowing this could be the last one. I mean, I know it pushes me to really try to go out and do really anything I want, because after that, there's nothing. And I think that about sums up my closing remarks.
Good. Good. So I mean, what we're talking about, people, um, are very basic parts of what we call the human condition. In our modern sensibilities, in our uh, modern philosophies, and so on, sometimes sophistries. Sometimes I guarantee it sounds like even what we're talking about is a puzzle. Um, and it gets
Even
so
I
much
know not what I
worse.
will say next.
I mean, it gets so much worse with some other people about how genuinely word salad all this becomes. But like I said earlier, and this is just kind of rolled off the top of my head because of course it's true. The conversation becomes less and less about, um, what if this, what if that, becomes much less about, is it moral to live forever or longer even? Is it this, that, or the other? It's more and more about what actually matters in life. To sum up what Tanner was saying, I'd very much like to invite Mark Twain. Um, he said simply, I do not fear death. I had been dead for billions and billions of years before I was born, and had not suffered the slightest inconvenience from it.
Right.
That's a good one. Tanner was just talking about that as well, and it's important.
It is.
It's extremely important that you make your own meaning, because if you don't, others will find meaning for you.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
important, people.
I
It's my brothers and sisters. It's important that you take care of yourself and to take care of the time that we have. I won't even use the word that we are given. We're not given anything. You have to go out there and take it. You have to. And you have to be moral about it. And you have to be honest about it. And you have to do all these things. It's a complicated mess. And you can do it. And you can do it together. Amen.
Actually, I have one more thing I want to say. This is either going to sound incredibly stupid or very intelligent of me.
Well,
Mhm.
just in
But
case for post, that was
Mhm.
the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching.
And sign.
Oh man,
All right.
we are
You
weighted
got-
with a
Oh.
heaving bosom.
I think we as society here have forgotten how to suffer. I
I
don't
don't
think we
believe
should.
you.
I don't think we should
Extraordinary
seek to.
claims, Tanner.
Well, I think we fail to appreciate what an important part of life being uncomfortable is.
Yeah,
I think we should not seek, as I have seen this, at least my own generation of people, we should not seek to totally eliminate all uncomfortability and suffering from our lives. We should first meet it, we should embrace it, and we should overcome it.
I agree with that. Just as a side little thing here, I'm sure in post we can put this segment right before my closing remarks. If that's possible, that would be neat. But anyway, it's like I do with my students. Um, one of the best things a teacher can possibly do is stop giving students answers to questions immediately when they ask them. Literally refuse to do so.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
I
give
mean,
them
like,
that think about it moment. Give 'em-
well, no, not a moment. Like I'm talking about, um, I can't tell you that. Okay, the data speaks for itself. For years, for AP chemistry, we have been doing like little duds of like 10% here to whatever, that are passing the AP exam for students. Last year, I got that number up to 35%, and if I genuinely had to put one little thing on it to say, why did it go so much, better in the first year I took over? I stopped giving these people answers. I started putting them at lab tables and telling them to deal with it. That's what I did. And in other words, like, here's a problem, and I'm not going to tell you the solution. You're going to tell me what you come up with, and you're going to tell me how you came up with it, and you have to have data with it. Otherwise, I don't believe anything you said. Goodbye. I mean, like that's how I got them to do so well. I stopped giving them the answers. I told them to deal with it.
I agree.
Cool. Well, that might be a cool place to cut it there. Although I am not the host, so I'll leave that up to you.
Make
Yeah.
sure you look
Well,
both ways before crossing the street.
yeah.
I swear
Don't
to
get hit by
God.
buses. I mean, but yeah. So I mean, like we say, people, like we say, closing statements here, not the closing ones, closing statements.
Mhm.
It's important. Like I say, go out there and find your meaning. Go and get it. Go and acquire it, and make sure it's a good one. All right, and love each other. Be good to each other. Party on.